Talk about missed deadlines. We turn our attention from Brussels to Vienna, where an historic deal on Iran's nuclear program was supposed to be signed by today, Tuesday. Exit the French foreign minister, the British foreign secretary, and more. Laurent Fabius, who says he won't return to town till late on Wednesday. He and others have listed the main 11th-hour sticking points, curbing Iran's ability to develop its nuclear program, the pace at which sanctions are lightened, and also the UN's watchdog's access to military sites, as well as the scientists who run them. More broadly, there's the perspective of perhaps this week closure on negotiations that started more than 12 years ago. We thought with the Greeks that failure was not an option. How about when it comes to Iran? What happens if there isn't a deal? Today in the France 24 debate, are these genuinely the finishing touches? And with us to talk about it, a pleasure as always to welcome back François Nicolot, former French ambassador to Iran. We're going to be joined shortly by Ali Vaez of International Crisis Group. Before we turn to our panel, though, let's cross to France 24's Sanam Chantier in Vienna. Sanam, when the day began, did you give it to us straight here? Did you think you had a deal?
Well, certainly, Francois, it's been a rollercoaster ride here in the Austrian capital. We woke up this morning speaking to a number of diplomats who told us that certainly the political will is there, and that's evident, and also the fact that there is a need to clinch this final comprehensive agreement before the midnight deadline, specifically because the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has planned a trip to Russia to meet with his counterpart, Vladimir Putin, and he can't really do that empty-handed. But of course, we were briefed by the EU's Federica Mogherini. She set the scene. She actually was very careful not to use the word extension. She talked about an additional few hours or even days. And of course, we were later briefed by the French foreign minister, as you mentioned, Laurent Fabius. He mentioned a number of sticking points, one of which we haven't actually heard for some time, and that was the research and development component of Iran's nuclear program. Now, whatever happens, despite the hurdles that remain, we know that July the 9th is a very big deadline specifically for the Americans. That's the date that the US President Barack Obama will have to hand to the Republican-controlled Congress a final draft of the agreement for approval. If he misses that deadline, the review period would be doubled from 30 to 60 days, leaving the agreement open to even more scrutiny.
All right, leaving open the ability to pick holes in it. You've covered so many of these sessions, Sanam. Would you say that the mood right now in Vienna is one where they see light at the end of the tunnel?
I've been covering these negotiations since 2008, but of course this particular round headed by the US Secretary of State John Kerry and his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif have been going on for some 18 months, and of course every step of the day the journalists have followed them from Geneva to Vienna to Montreux to Lausanne to Amman and even New York, and here we are today. Actually, on Monday night, there was a poll by a very conservative Iranian media outlet affiliated with the country's Revolutionary Guards Corps, Tasnim. They questioned some 200 journalists, asking them how optimistic they are that Iran and the world powers will be able to clinch a final agreement by the end of the week. Interestingly, it was the Iranian and American journalists who were the most optimistic. With the Iranians, there's no surprise, because for them, this is very much a personal story. They want to see a detente with the international community. They also want to see an alleviating of the sanctions, the international punitive measures imposed on the Iranian country. But that said, we know that whatever happens, even if there is a final agreement, they won't see immediate relief. It might even take up until the end of the year to see some kind of sanctions relief.
All right, many thanks for that, Sanam Chantier. Of course, one point that Sanam put up, and I'll put it to you first, François Nicolot, she was saying how if they don't have a deal by Friday, that gives the hostile U.S. Congress double the time to pick holes in whatever they come up with. The State Department saying we're frankly more concerned about the quality of the deal than we are about the clock. Is that genuine?
No, I don't think it's so important, because if even this time is double, if it goes from 30 days to 60 days, you have to remember that half of it is, some holidays for the parliament. So not much will happen during this period. So frankly, I believe that even if on the 10th we have not reached a result, if it goes on for a few more days, this is not so dramatic after all.
It's not so dramatic?
I think so. What would be dramatic is if people start considering extending the talks for weeks or for months, and then I believe this would be a signal of failure, because it's now or never, really. I mean, there are a few problems to be solved. They are complex. They are about the document, the final agreement will represent several dozens of pages, probably 60, 70, etc. And so one can understand that the drafting is a delicate matter, but it is a matter of days and not a matter of weeks. If people begin thinking in terms of weeks, of months, that means that there are substantial points which have not been solved, and this would be really disquieting, because frankly, there is no plan B, if there is no agreement, if we go towards a failure, really we jump into the unknown.
All right, let me turn to Ali Vaez, then, of International Crisis Group, who joins us from Vienna. Ali, we've seen in the case of Greece, where when deadlines are missed, the more they're missed, the more things become toxic. Is it very important that they get a deal before the end of the week?
That's absolutely right. Every time that we miss a deadline, this becomes just more complicated. And I have to say, every time that the negotiators actually go back to their capitals, they lose momentum. And when they come back, it takes a lot of time to get to the point that they were before leaving the venue of the negotiations. And I really believe that if the parties stay here for a few additional days, they stand a high chance of being able to resolve the remaining differences.
So how do you feel when you see
account in the bigger?
How do you see when you see the French foreign minister, the British home secretary, the Russian foreign ministers leave town?
Look, they can come back if necessary, and the reality is that they're in close proximity. And even if they are not here at the end of the day, this is not the final signing ceremony. This is where the agreement is reached, but it has to go through domestic processes, especially in Tehran and Washington, before it is endorsed. And then it has to go to the UN Security Council. And I believe that's where the real signing ceremony, although there might not necessarily be signed, but the real ceremony of finalizing the agreement takes place, and that's where we need the foreign ministers. But in the bigger scheme of things, in 22 months of negotiations, an additional 30-day or 60-day review period by Congress doesn't make a big difference.
All right, François Nicoulot, you're saying it's not so important when the French foreign minister leaves town, but it's also about perception, right? And there is this sense that this is a two-way deal between the Americans and the Iranians, and everybody else is just a sideshow.
Well, this is quite close to reality. The real negotiation is really run by the Americans and by the Iranians. The other ones are the side actors, and it's true. I mean, and they have the assistants remain, of course, there. You have the political directors who follow closely everything which happens. So the other ministers really don't have to stay in Vienna. It has no sense for them to remain in Vienna during all this time. It is important that Kerry, yes, remains in Vienna, because here he is the key negotiator. For the others, it's not that important, really.
All right, a lot of reactions from viewers. Milad Jokar on Twitter: after unprecedented achievements, a deal now is far better than no deal. Everything to win, so much to lose in case of failure. Just to put it all again in perspective, this is a process that dates back to 2003, when, as you can see, Rouhani was not the president, but a nuclear negotiator. There you see in that picture François Nicoulot. He's greeting Jacques Straw, the then foreign secretary, Dominique de Villepin, the French foreign minister, Mr. Fischer, the German foreign minister at the time. When you think back to that period, did you think it would take 12 years?
I don't know. You see the little man behind Mr. Straw, that was me at the time. So, no, but I'm just joking. How would I say?
Oh, it is you, in fact. I could see it.
Yes.
There you are in the picture.
Little man, I was a little behind me. Yeah, behind Straw, exactly.
Okay.
And no, at the time, of course, we were optimistic. There was a feeling that we could find a solution. It appeared after quite a while that no solution was possible. mainly because of the American position. I mean, the Americans were not too happy that the Europeans started this negotiation, but they tried to control it. And they were asking the Europeans to have one goal in this negotiation, that the Iranians dismantle the enrichment program. And of course, asking that for the Iranian, it was an impossible task. And in fact, so the negotiation finally failed and stopped. But what is interesting is that, of course, when Bush left and when Obama came, Obama made this important concession that is, that the Iranians would be able to have an enrichment program, of course a limited enrichment program, a tightly controlled program, but still, it was not the zero centrifuge, which was the mantra at the time of in 2003.
And the Hassan Rouhani, who was then nuclear negotiator, is he the same man as he was then?
So it was quite interesting because I had good contact with him. It was new for him to negotiate. He was not used to negotiate with Westerners, let's say. And at the beginning, he was a bit nervous, and he looked like somebody a bit sectarian and so on. But slowly he discovered that he had facing him people of goodwill, and he opened up, and the negotiation started in fact quite well, but finally, as I said, it went to a stumbling block, which was this matter of the zero centrifuge, which was unacceptable for the Iranians.
Ali Vaez, when you look now at the situation, what we've had these negotiators that they know when their kids' birthdays are, they've gotten quite chummy, a little too chummy perhaps, no?
No, I don't think so. The reality is that these negotiators have spent a lot of time together, but there have also been a lot of change in different teams of the negotiators. The reality is that there is now more trust than before, and that is essential to overcome some of these very complicated issues that these people have to deal with. It's a very different atmosphere from the time that Ambassador Niccolo was involved in, and I think we have really made progress by light years in terms of fostering better understanding between the two sides.
All right, better understanding in Vienna, but what happens in Washington once a deal is eventually signed? Can Congress scuttle it?
Look, the deal has to be reviewed by Congress. Either this review period is going to be 30 days or 60 days. It doesn't matter. It's going to be a big battle on the Capitol Hill. And those who are critical of this agreement, those who oppose it, are going to do their utmost to make sure that they kill it at this stage. And I think we will witness a big fight between the White House and Congress. And it will be quite dramatic. And the fate of the agreement can actually depend on a few votes. But the reality is that the onus at the end of the day is on those who oppose the agreement, because even from a mathematical perspective, the White House is in a better situation. If Congress rejects this agreement, the president will veto it, and then he can uphold his veto if he has only 1/3 of one chamber in the U.S. Congress, whereas his opponents need 2/3 of both chambers. So the onus is really on them. And given electoral politics in Washington, it's hard to imagine that Democrats would actually vote down a key foreign policy initiative of their own president.
All right, reactions coming in. One person saying that deadlines do matter. Hajika on Twitter, hope I pronounced that right. Missed deadline means no deadlines. Obama is a failure. So he says there. Ali Vaez, we know, of course, what the reaction is of the likes of Israel, which is strongly against this deal. We've also seen just this week an increase in those air attacks by Saudi Arabia, which is waging what some have labeled a proxy war against Iran, with the fighting across its southern border in Yemen. What's going to be the reaction of Gulf monarchs if there is such a deal?
Well, I think they will officially welcome it by issuing statements, but in practice, it will exacerbate their fears of Iran gaining too much power in the Middle East and the United States not only leaving the Middle East, but in collusion with Iran to establish a Shia dominance in the region. This is a perception. It's not necessarily accurate, but the deal will probably exacerbate the fears within Sunni countries in the region as well as Israel. The way that they react is hard to predict, but I think the Iranians should try to alleviate some of these concerns by taking some confidence-building steps that could signal to other neighboring countries that the agreement is not coming at their expense.
And what are those steps they could take?
Look, one example, I think a low-hanging fruit is probably the case of Yemen, which is the back door of Saudi Arabia, which is it's an internal issue for them, and the Saudis really care about Yemen. And although Iran has quite limited influence within the Houthis are in no way Saudi and Iranian proxy, but the Iranians could take some steps that would signal to the Saudis that they're willing to build more confidence and come to a modus vivendi in the region in which both countries can maintain their influence. There are other cases as well, urgent cases like Syria, but those are more difficult to address. I think the easier option is probably Yemen.
François Nicolau?
But I would like to say that the most important step, for confidence building is that Iran applies faithfully and scrupulously the agreement which will be reached. And frankly, I am very confident that if Iran does it, this way, and I believe that this is what will happen, confidence will blossom slowly in the region. People will realize that Iran is in good faith, is applying faithfully the agreement, and certainly that will reduce the tension with Israel, the tension with Saudi Arabia, and with the other countries of the Gulf.
We mentioned a moment ago the domestic opposition that Barack Obama will face. What about the domestic opposition that Iran's president will face? How strong will there be a backlash against the deal?
There is a strong opposition in Parliament and even in the deep state, as we could say, around the leader. There is strong opposition against President Rouhani. President Rouhani does not have a majority in the parliament. We have to remember this. But again, what is important is that the supreme leader supports the negotiators and support the negotiation and will support the agreement. He has done it very consistently from the beginning, and I am confident that he will ask the Majlis, the Iranian Congress, to vote in favor and to approve the agreement. So there will be no problem on this line. But it is true that the very strong opposition to Rouhani will, withdraw on a second line of defense. They will, because the danger of this agreement is that the implementation of the agreement could change things in Iran, within the Iranian society, by opening up the economy, by opening up the society. And this, of course, is a source of great fear for the conservative, for the nucleus of the regime, which is very conservative. So they will try to take care that there is no progress in terms of human rights, in terms of political rights, and in external policy. They will try to maintain a hard line in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, etc. But again, so we don't know exactly what will happen. If there is an agreement, the agreement won't solve everything in Iran and in the relationship between Iran and the outer world. But if there is no agreement, then we are certain that there will be no progress at all. And again, we will go into the unknown.
Ali Vaez, will Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, be able to keep a lid on it if there is a deal and we start seeing all these foreign companies coming in investing?
Francois, I believe Ayatollah Khamenei will position himself in a way to make sure the agreement stands, but he will not associate himself too much with the agreement to become accountable for its potential risks. he will basically hedge his bets. That is the pattern that he has established in the past few months and years. And he has the luxury of doing that, unlike the President of the United States, who has to come out right after the deal and defend it. Ayatollah Khamenei has the luxury of taking time and absorbing reactions within the society and within the political elite, and then from the West, and then reacting in a measured and calculated way. But how much he associates himself with the agreement will also mean how much President Rouhani and his allies will be vulnerable to criticism from their opponents and their rivals within the Iranian political system. But at the end of the day, what is important is, governance in Iran is a function of balancing different power centers. And I think at the end of the day, I agree with Ambassador Niccolo that if President Rouhani's rivals lose the game on the nuclear front, they will probably shift the arena of competition to other issues, such as socio-cultural and even political reform.
Ali Vaez, I want to thank you for joining us from Vienna, where it's injury time for those Iran nuclear talks. I want to thank as well François Nicolau. Pleasure as always. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we are joined by Emma James. How are you?
Hi there. Not too bad, thank you.
So, no deal yet when it comes to Iran.
No, but not a great deal of optimism when you look at what's being said out there in the media, either because people have no optimism that it's going to happen, or because they feel that if it does happen, it's not going to be a good deal for anyone involved. So it's quite interesting to look at how different publications are treating this one. If we take a look at Time magazine, they're really homing in on what is the real stumbling block as they see it with these negotiations. They say that a nuclear deal with Iran is only as strong as the inspections that verify its implementation. Now, they say that after 18 months of talks, with the deal within striking distance, it seems, would the Americans, if they can't get the deal they want, would they have the strength of character to actually get up and walk away from those negotiating tables empty-handed? They talk about the fact that negotiators have basically struggled from the very start with this issue of access to nuclear facilities. April's interim...
By the way, the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog is currently in Tehran, and that is precisely what he's talking about there.
Exactly. Now, April's interim agreement was to lift sanctions step by step, and there was an agreement that they would have access to nuclear facilities, but there was no idea given just how much access there would be. Then in May, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, ruled out any inspections of nuclear facilities or military facilities. And that could be key, according to the Jewish press. Now, they quote an Iranian expert, Michael Ledeen. He's not Iranian himself. He's an analyst and has studied Iran for many decades. He claims that Khamenei has told his minions in Vienna that they must sign absolutely nothing. He clearly feels that the Iranian supreme leader is not in the mood for negotiations. And the reason is, he says that he believes they're already getting everything they want. That's Iran. So he feels that any deal they get...
Including crippling sanctions, but okay.
Well, this is what he's saying. Ledeen says that the desperation of the US negotiators have led Iran's supreme leader to conclude there is no reason for him to do a deal with the devil, as he puts it. He predicts the outcome of these talks will be a no-deal deal, as he puts it, a commitment to come to an actual agreement by the end of the calendar year, a kind of face-saving exercise. He says it boils down to the fact that the players will act as if a deal has been accomplished, while just some details remain to be worked out. Now, looking at foreign policy, they've tweeted and released this article today saying that basically this blown deadline really means that nothing's going to happen here. They say that this will give the hawks on Capitol Hill a little more time to actually kill off that final agreement, because they're not meeting a deadline. It will give them more time to actually talk about it on Capitol Hill, and that it won't go ahead.
Will there be a no-deal deal?
Yes, it is true. In fact, technically, it is very likely that the deal which is being put together won't be signed. The signature will take place later, when they're already...
Right, but will it be something that's sort of devoid of any meaning, and it's just a face-saving
No, not at all. It is what people call a political arrangement. It's not. It won't be an international treaty, because if it were an international treaty, it would have to be ratified by the Senate, by the American Congress. Precisely. I mean, the Americans are very careful to keep it at a lower level, the level of political
But it will be a
arrangement,
significant document.
which is the privilege of the executive, you know.
But it will be a significant document, you think?
Oh yes, there's no doubt about it. Okay. I have no doubt about it.
All right. I want to thank you, Emma James. I want to thank as well Ambassador Nicolo Ali Taez for being with us from Vienna. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.